Would you watch a Clayface movie? Clayface is one of the latest projects that seems to be moving forward in the DCU, set for release in 2026. Of course, trust nothing till it's in your hands. But the idea is interesting to ponder. Can Clayface carry a movie? Would you want him to? Which Clayface would it even be? Because there are so many options. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and we have a Clay list here where we've gone through most of the Clayfaces out there. We have not done 8. I'm sorry, Johnny Williams. But yes, there are at least that many Clayfaces, and there's more if you count some of the offshoots. But for some, the idea of a Clayface movie may seem odd, even though Clayface has been adapted a decent amount across animation and live action. There's a lot of Clayface out there. In terms of Batman villains, he's probably up there in terms of being adapted.
You again. Hagen, listen to me. There is no Hagen. It's only me now. Clayface.
They're not all Basil Karlo. Basil Karlo is starting to edge out the others, but you've seen Hagen, you've seen Cassius, you've seen the other kind of offshoots that have been created just for their own series, like Ethan Bennett.
Yin, what's become of us?
But whenever this ends up happening, whether they're doing a Joker movie or a Penguin series, the question that tends to come up is, can a villain carry a work? The answer is yes, it just depends on how it's executed. And for some, the question in terms of Clayface is, how are they gonna make that work? What's it gonna lean into, and what would you want to see? Well, in terms of the information they have floating out there, it's that the script is by Mike Flanagan. Again, so far, things can change so much behind the scenes, but as of time of recording, that's what's going on. Flanagan has quite the horror pedigree. He's worked on a lot of things. Oculus, Hush, not that Hush, the movie Hush, Doctor Sleep. He was the showrunner for Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass. Lots of horror, which gives some indication to the tone, as does a tweet from 2021 wherein he stated, really keen to do a standalone Clayface movie as a horror slash thriller slash tragedy. There should be some tragedy. Actually, all of them have a little bit of tragedy inside of them. There's just a sadness to the various Clayfaces, however they come to their powers and whatever the incarnation. The question on some people's mind may be whether or not they're going to include Batman in it or not. Would you want them to, or do you think that you could get a Clayface thing on its own with kind of Batman off in the background? That is one of the things about the Batman mythos. It is a very strong foundation, and it tends to be one where the other characters inside of it can stand on their own if you give them an interesting enough plot and characterization to carry them. But there's a lot to choose from. So which Clayface? Basil Karlo was the first Clayface, and debuted in Detective Comics number 40 in 1940. So the Golden Age version. This was the one that had no powers. He was an actor, he donned a costume, he went around killing people seeking revenge. That one definitely had the more kind of thriller aspect. Much later versions would give Karlo powers. This version would be phased into the background in comics because there'd be multiple. You'd have Matt Hagen, who would come up in the Silver Age. He debuted in Detective Comics 298 in 1961, and the animated series from the 90s would take that name, but then fuse some of the backstory with the Karlo backstory by taking the acting, because that wasn't Hagen's backstory, he was just a thief, but it would give the Hagen power set in there. But how he got them would also be different. It wasn't that he bathed in a mud pit. There was some mud pit bathing, magical mud pit, Silver Age. There are others who get less play. There's Preston Payne. He was the third Clayface who debuted in Detective Comics 478 in 1978. He had the ability where he couldn't really change shape, but what it was that when he touched people, they would melt. It was really sad. This after a failed attempt to cure himself from an illness. He was driven mad. He had a mannequin girlfriend. We've done videos on all of these. It's always a good time to revisit the various Clayfaces. There's Lady Clay, Sandra Fuller, who debuted in Outsiders 21 in 1987. She tends to be a bit more used time of recording in comics. You'll see Lady Clay pop up a bit more. Her and the third Clayface had a son, Cassius. I want to say Cassius, but everybody's like, no, it's Cassius. It's Clayface. That's the real name. He showed up in Batman Shadow of the Bat 27 in 1994. Those stories are very hard, and he ends up in a lab being experimented upon. You actually get to see this version in Birds of Prey. They use that version. There are lots of things that happen in short-lived Birds of Prey that people tend to forget, and that's one of them. We got that Clayface there.
I think not, Helena. Besides, you wouldn't be able to stop him. He's become much too powerful now.
That version wasn't one-to-one comic accurate by any means, but the Cassius name was utilized. There's a corrupted scientist version after who gets corrupted because he was working with Cassius and then he gets infected. There's a completely unrelated one when Catwoman's series relaunches who is killing prostitutes, who also has the ability to shapeshift. That was 2002, the beginning of the Goggles era. And there's Johnny Williams, who ties into Hush in One Day Johnny, I swear. But as mentioned, there's been lots of adaptations, and it tends to be Karlo. You have the Harley Quinn animated series version, which people tend to be fairly fond of.
I, for one, am glad we can once more be freed from the petty trappings of campus life.
There was a Gotham sighting as well.
Who am I? What is my name?
And each of these does something a little different. Oh, there's also the Pennyworth version. That one just decided to do its own thing. The Batman would have not only the Ethan Bennett Clayface that it would create in a bid to kind of get around not being able to use Two-Face, but then they would also have the Karlo version later on as well. Most depictions of Karlo will lean into the failed actor aspect, and there'll be different reasons for it. The Caped Crusader also took the Basil Karlo version, but added the powered element to it, so it was a bit of a meeting of the worlds, kind of like the animated series was. That actually did a very good job of updating his Golden Age motivation, making it that because of the type of face he had, he couldn't get the roles he wanted.
Do you want the whole tale, detective? Of all the years, all the parts lost because of my face?
Also, we'd be remiss to not mention video games. Clayface appearing in a lot of video games. In a couple of versions, the reason why it doesn't work out for Clayface acting-wise is because he's a terrible actor. So the point is, there are lots of ways that one could take this concept, and many ways that it's already been done. Gotham did a whole he was revived by Hugo Strange thing. Recently, there was the Basil Karlo version from Suicide Squad Isekai.
They're not all that pretty to look at, but they'll have to do. And well, being an understudy isn't really my thing, baby.
He was rocking an Annie Are You Okay Michael Jackson look, and was much more of a flamboyant showman. There's gonna be Creature Commandos Clayface, so there is a lot of Clayface. However, for some, this may still be a bit of a surprising choice to lead a Bat film. At this point, it seems that Karlo and Hagen are the most well-known versions. It depends upon when one came up and what they were watching, or alternatively reading. But as mentioned, there is a tragedy and a horror element to a lot of these origins and stories from the start. And there's lots of space to play in either the emotional, psychological horror realm or also the body horror realm if you go into the Clayface that has powers because of the shaping and actually just becoming a mud clay thing. It'll be interesting to see if it comes to fruition and what they do with it. But I'm very curious what you would like to see and what direction you would like to see the character taken in. If it is to go down the horror route, would you be interested in it going more into the body horror or combination of that and the psychological? Would you be interested in seeing a version that had no powers and how they would work with that? Although some would argue that that is when Clayface is at his least interesting, that you do need some of that ability to make him a true threat for Batman, if that's what one's concerning oneself with. Some may feel that they would just rather see another Batman villain, and if so, who would that be? Who would you like to take the spotlight, and who do you feel could lead a film? Do you just worry about how awkward the special effects could be if done poorly? Practical effects for Clayface. It has been interesting to see Karlo have that resurgence in both adaptation and inside of the comics themselves, because as of New 52, they went back to that version of the character. Poor Hagen, he's just kind of been kicked off to the side, people taking pieces of his origin and applying it as needed. He's getting that Wally West treatment. This announcement just really made me think on how many times Clayface has been adapted, which is a lot. Perhaps some of you have a lot of Clayface to check out. For me, I'm always interested in seeing a new adaptation of Clayface. There are so many different ways you can approach what happens with Clayface and what one can make it mean that it makes him a fun character to play with. You can get really deep with it, or you can keep it more surface. Clayface is also one where, while his actions will also lead him into conflict with Batman, he doesn't have any real direct conflict or beef with him personally, which also places him in a unique space from some of the other Batman rogues. Any of the characters who have a lot of their own stuff going on outside of Batman and Bruce Wayne, they have a better shot of being able to do their own thing. For some of the others, you have to push a little harder to get through that Batman connection or people wanting to see Batman, which is always going to be a bit of a thing when you're doing a kind of Bat property. And even with that said, there can be exceptions. But yes, I think I just wanted to add to the Clay list and assuage some of my guilt for not having talked about Johnny Williams yet. Are you excited for the potential hopefully actually happening, maybe already here Clayface movie? I don't know when you're watching this. Share all your thoughts down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this time today to spend discussing comics and comic adjacent things with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.